Hello everyone, welcome to a new video on Marshal Politics. I've not made a video in a couple months, but looking forward to getting back to making new videos. I'm going to be covering Senate elections, particularly my favorite race to cover, the Ohio Senate race, which will probably be my next video right after this one. And yeah, probably that, and then a couple other things. But in this video, I would like to discuss a major problem in the United States that has accelerated for decades, starting the 1950s, following World War II, 1950s and 60s, and I'm going I'm going to go over the statistics, the risks, the problems that obesity's problem is causing for the United States among its population, and then finally I'm going to go over potential solutions to this problem. So we're going to take a look at this basic map. So this is obesity prevalence by state. I believe this is just among adults. So this isn't even covering children, which, by the way, obesity rates in children are also significantly higher than they used to be in the past as well. So here you can see the lowest state the state that has the lowest obesity rate is Colorado, which has an obesity rate of 23%. So it's at least 1 in 5 adults are obese in the state that has the lowest obesity rate. I believe the highest is Mississippi, and then West Virginia, which almost have 40% obesity rate among adults. So these numbers are particularly concerning when you look at the long term. So if you look at this here, obesity rates then and now, this is from livestrong.com. Approximately 10% of U.S. adults were classified as having obesity during the 1950s. In 2011-2012, however, the CDC reported approximately 35% of U.S. adults had obesity. The prevalence of obesity among American adults has more than tripled within the last 6 decades. So, and then it also talks about for the children here as well. National surveys for childhood obesity were recorded before 1963. However, the rate of childhood obesity in the U.S. began to rise in the 1980s. 1980, 7% of children ages 6 to 11 had obesity. In 2012, the rate was nearly 18%. In adolescents 12 to 19 years of age, the increase in obesity rates was more striking, climbing from 5 to 21% during the same period. So from the 1980s to 2012. So this isn't just a problem to scoff at, just accept it, act like it's something that's normal. The truth is that previous societies were never like this. Obesity was actually more a common thing among the nobility, and it would actually be a sign of having great wealth actually. But that is not the current society we live in due to modernizations in technology, you know different capitalist practices. It has caused a massive crisis for large portions of the American population, where you have groups of Americans who are becoming seriously obese, and it's impacting every part of their lives. And most commonly, and it's proven that people who are obese have a much shorter life expectancies. And this is a gigantic problem in the U.S., and a big problem is that this problem hasn't really been tackled seriously by anyone in our leader class at all. It's really just been scoffed at. So this problem is actually, it's prevalent among all groups, but in fact it actually interestingly gives just it's highest most among African Americans, which is something interesting. You don't really see, Democrats really, they are so concerned with like the welfare of Black lives, but like they don't care about the gigantic obesity rates among these people. And if you wanna, and this is such a massive problem because it's also it does it like on the massive societal scale, it's obviously terrible. When you look at like individually, just looking at the impact that obesity has on people, I mean, it's disastrous. Lowers motivation, worsen mental health, worsen physical health. I mean, everything's worse off. Worse life expectancy. You're not able to like live life effectively, really. And you're much more miserable than not. And and one reason why this problem has just exploded. One fact actually that I was going to mention later on, but I guess I'll mention it now. The pandemic has also accelerated weight gain among basically all demographics in the United States. So it actually says the popular term quarantine 15 alludes to the coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic with an extra 15 pounds. However, a new survey by the American Psychological Association has found that 42% of U.S. adults said they gained too much weight, and the amount of gained weight they reported averaged 29 pounds. So that is far above the 15 pounds that was mentioned before. And this is a survey of more than 3,000 people. Also found that 1 in 10 respondents said they gained more than 50 pounds, which the APA says is a warning sign that people are struggling with mental health challenges, which is sort of obvious there. And a big problem that's been caused by the pandemic, I'd say, is how it's warped people's minds, and it's made people less, you know, active socially, not just social, but physically too. And it's made people significantly more lazy, more demotivated, not like concerned about their actions. Like it's sort of I'd say it's maybe even created this sort of nihilistic mindset that a lot of people have, that like none of their choices matter. And a lot of people were in a terrible place, especially a year ago, especially 2 years ago, with the pandemic, and how people, were suffering terribly under these lockdowns. Now, obviously, a lot of the lockdowns have ended. All the mass mandates across the country have ended, but still, we're gonna continue to live on with these effects, and no one's really been talking about this at all, really. So, but again, one of the major major reasons why obesity has become such a major problem. I believe this article mentioned some reasons, or it might have been this one. One of these mentioned it, but here. So one of the obviously main reasons is definitely, so if you actually obesity is actually much more common among lower middle class to middle class groups, actually, and lower class groups. Um, and that is primarily because the sources of food that these people are, people like me are, looking for, or the consuming from, these food sources are, a lot of them are highly unhealthy. I mean, fast food is a big problem. You have people who are, not as well financially, and they can't afford, especially now with inflation and rising, food costs. I mean, people are going to go for the cheapest food possible. And more often than not, the most cheapest options for food are often the most unhealthiest. And these people, they don't, in the long term, people don't realize what's happening to their health. They just they turn to these sources of food out of more or less desperation, and I think that partially the government partially enables it. I'd say, especially with certain food assistance programs, which I fully support food assistance programs. There are, I think that some people are the uses that people are using it for. They're buying unhealthy foods. I mean, I'm pretty sure people have been able to like buy all these terrible snacks. I think you can even buy chewing gum with certain federal food programs, and it's really a disaster. So, but getting past like the causes and everything, which I feel like for most people is sort of obvious. I mean, really, as a whole, society has become much, I'd say, more idle. Over time, we've become much less active than our ancestors. You know, a century ago, obesity wasn't even like, even like a noted problem really at all among Americans, or really pretty much any country in the world, like among a large section of the population, let alone to like the point where it is now in the United States, which is, supposedly the richest country in the world. And we can't even manage the physical and mental health of our own citizens. But, in the past, our societies were much more active. And I think over time, due to technological advances, and I'd say also like new developments in like foods that has happened, especially like fast food in the 1950s and 60s, and like and like all the extra ingredients these companies are adding into, uh, foods from supermarkets and other places. These foods have, worsened the health of many Americans, and you got a bunch of, especially in schools as well, among children, you have, easy access to snacks like chips or ice cream or whatever, and it's so easy for kids to just get this and just be really hooked on it. And I think it's also a thing is that our society doesn't really promote like self-control or or any really sort of discipline in a way. And it's a major problem. And I think people sort of don't realize the repercussions of their actions. And I mean, that's going to be disaster, when these you know younger generation, we get older, and then we have can't even manage our own adult lives, because can't even function properly as a teenager or an adolescent. And it's going to be disastrous in the future. And this problem needs to be tackled in a meaningful way. So now I'm gonna have a segue into, I'd say, really the main point I wanted to make in this video, which is the solutions to this problem. So this article mentioned sugar taxes, which I 100% agree with should be implemented. Probably put a certain percentage tax. 50 is probably too high, but anything above 20% on products that have a certain amount of sugar, um, per serving size. And also, you could do the same thing, because the thing is with sugar. Sugar is actually the leading cause of obesity in America. It's actually not even like fatty foods necessarily. Actually, sugar is extremely addictive, and the more people have of it, the more they want it. And people are not aware of like the effects it has on the, well, people, some people are aware, but like they're so overcome by this addiction to it that like they just don't even care enough to stop themselves and like think like, what should I really be eating this, should I really be eating this food, should I be eating this dessert or whatever, should I be eating this certain amount? And that's why I think a sugar tax would probably be particularly effective. And now probably, there are more drastic plans you could have implemented, you know, especially in schools. I'd say probably, actually, tackling more on a more macro level, you could probably overhaul FDA regulations, prevent certain ingredients from being added to foods, and also limit the amount of calories per serving in certain food products. Would definitely, be be significant in a positive direction to actually ending obesity in America. And this is just more on a this is more tackling the source of obesity, but like you also want to have people who are physically fit too. So like it's enough to like, it's fine to be, you know, it's sort of easier to get over obesity, but then you also got to get to the point where you got to be, physically fit. And I don't, it's not like you don't expect people to be like jacked insanely, but like people who are like able to like run a mile without passing out, like that's like sort of a bare minimum thing. And being able to, effectively, you know, walk around in life and not like, pass out by the time you the walk up a flight of stairs, which is a thing I've definitely had happen to me before, but it's a big problem with society as a whole. So another thing you could probably have is some sort of federal, investment to recreational areas. You could probably encourage this at a state level too, especially if you're looking at this map. Uh, having states, with the highest obesity rates like Mississippi, West Virginia, Ohio, Texas, bunch of these other southern states, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and pretty much every state as a whole. Because again, obesity has become so increasingly like prevalent that like this wasn't uh even like fathomed like even a century ago. Just like to imagine how radically the lives of humans have changed in the past century or so due to technological advances and advances in the economy and stuff, and the effects of that have really accelerated this problem. So, uh, and I'd say that's pretty much all I wanted to say for this video. I'd say there are dozens of other solutions you could have to this problem to address obesity. You know, you could have, uh, sports programs. I'd say in schools, sports programs could be very effective. Also, I'd say increasing especially in schools with physical education, increase like actual like exercise and like stuff you do in those classes, because I know across American like I mean personally I've seen in physical education classes, we don't really do as much as we probably should be doing. And people are like so chronically addicted to basically, I'd say it's really an addiction to being idle, where people are just like so stuck in their states and they can't even like bother to try to do more and think beyond like the present and think about their mental health in the long and physical health in the long term. And I think we need have probably more education on that fact, because there definitely are people who are concerned about stuff like that, but on a massive scale there's a like I'd say there's massive apathy among the general population towards like actually improving one's life and becoming a better person. So yeah, but yeah, I think this is a major problem, and I think that in the future, it's obviously it's gonna be getting worse, and especially among children. I mean, this is even more concerning because obesity among children is just like it's ridiculous. Like when you think of like yourself as a child, like you're supposed to be young and active and move around and not sitting around and doing nothing. You know, children are supposed to be active. They're supposed to be engaging with the world. They're supposed to be learning more about it. And they're not supposed to be idle and doing nothing. So that's why I'd say in the future, what's going to happen to these children, when they maybe even have children of their own. Is this trend going to continue? It probably will. I mean, there's really no signs of this stopping. And again, there's no concerted effort by, our leaders to even address this issue at all. And really, I'd say when I mentioned apathy before, like towards like improving physical mental health and just like making oneself better, I say there's this general apathy towards this issue in general. I feel like people are sort of just accepting it. It's like, oh, like what are you gonna do? You can't do it. You can't stop people from eating what they want or whatever. That's like what libertarians would say. They say like, oh, what business does the state have in trying to improve the physical or mental health of its citizens, the people it's supposed to represent? And that's just such a again, libertarians are like utterly stupid. And of course, it should be the job of the government to, as much as possible to improve the mental health, physical health of, the American population, because I think it's an increasing problem. And I think people just don't fundamentally understand how much of a problem this is going to be in the long term, because it's only going to get worse from here. And if we're might get to a point where this problem will be so large and like we just can't even get over it. And I think that you know if our leaders just like look at this and they just treat it like it's nothing. I mean, all these larger companies are all fine with it. McDonald's, Burger King. Something I like to say is like do the owners of these companies like even eat the food they make, they sell to the general population? And the likelihood is no, they really don't, because they know it's bad for them. But they're glad selling it to other people to get them addicted onto their products so they can make money. And like that's a terribly greedy and selfish thing uh that you see by from an economic perspective. And I think that I've touched pretty much every single point I wanted to make in this video. And I hope you all of course enjoyed this video. I haven't made a video in a long time. I hope you maybe enjoyed listening to my rambling again. But I think it would be better to see, more, a dialogue, more discussion on this issue, because I do think it really is a major problem. And I used to have this problem myself. I'd have like terrible, like there'd be terrible times when like literally didn't want to do anything, and it would be honestly terrible for me. I just felt terrible as a whole, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other people feel the same way. And like I don't want to blame individual people for this problem, because to an extent it is, but there is so much more that the state can encourage among the population to stop it. Because I think it's a personal a problem that has been accelerated by external influences, particularly by economic forces that some say are beyond our control. Like libertarians think that we can't interfere in the market, which I think we can. And I think it is in the vital interest of our federal government to address this issue. Also, state governments can address a lot too, possibly more effectively, depending on which who is administering their plans, which state. But but yeah, I hope you all enjoy this video, and I will see you all in the next video. I hope you all have an excellent day. So, farewell.